Dear humanity, please be advised, absolutist statements are often misleading, generally inaccurate, and rarely are they ever absolutely true.
Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the almost daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Good morning, friends. Hello and namaste. It is Monday, January 25th, and I realize I've got to repackage this segment of the show. I can't keep using Good Morning Trumptopia. Trumptopia is now officially, almost a week over. Despite whatever madness all the Q blind faith believers are clinging to. Put a pin in that, we'll talk about it in a hot minute. Although I think my new favorite Q-related meme is Q, when the deep state pretends to take itself down. I haven't posted it on my Instagram yet, but I'm sure I will soon, eventually. I'm thinking about, creating my own version of it. But anyways, how the fuck are you? I'm exhausted. I just spent the weekend in an insomniatic weirdness. All the spiritual friends are out there talking about the Schumann resonance vibe. That may or may not have contributed to my insomnia. But I filled the time with meditation and the deep philosophical reviewing / binge watching of Westworld. Mock me all you want. There was something to it. But we'll put a pin in that because that belongs in the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's totally irrelevant media reviews, which I don't do enough of, I know. Programming note, I apologize to you. I went off for several episodes there about this fascinating, new, interesting experimental experiment I was going to do, and I totally waffled on it. I got some work done, and it was kind of mind-numbingly exhausting to do. But that may have had more to do with the fact that I've literally been sitting in my pajamas in my house, either in this chair or that couch, through all of 2020. And sitting and trying to do complex audio engineering was just not high on my list of things that was giving me, lots of exciting motivation. But I do intend to see if I can't revisit that in the not too distant future. I'm trying to snap out of the lingering hangover for all of the mess that was 2020. And for those of you who are new to the show, I'm not blind faithfully presuming we've solved all the world's problems just because Trump is gone and blue party is in charge. So in terms of repackaging this segment of the show, so for those of you who are like, segment of the show, what is he talking about? Theoretically speaking, conceptually speaking, this show is designed to have multiple, quote, segments, and I am making bunny ear quotes in the air, segments, the way you would see on a complex multi-block news show or whatever. I'm not pretending to be news. Please never cite me as a news source. You will get blasted out of the water by anybody who thinks it's ridiculous you're quoting me. And they have mostly, the right idea. I am an opinion talk show host. I am, and that's even a bit of a stretch. But this is supposed to be a talk show in which we discuss the news. I'm not pretending to report it. Never have I ever claimed to be a journalist. Let us be clear. I am an entertainment host at best. But I digress. What was I rambling about? Oh, right. I failed to deliver on the multiplex experiment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you will in a hot second once you dig into the show between now and New Year's. If you're really new to the show... segments, right. If you're really new to the show, or if you're a really old fan and you're like, what the fuck is he talking about with segments? There's Good Morning Trumptopia, ostensibly the segment I'm sharing with you now, in which that's the umbrella or the theme, the label, the bucket I use for like my political observations. This is where I wanted to talk about very specifically, as implied by the title, the absurdities of the Trumptopian movement. For it really did sort of slowly clusterfuck itself into a sort of half-ass movement. Which, hopefully, with any luck, is now going to completely, fall apart. Just waffle like a flan in a cupboard. And that was a vague attempt to reference an Eddie Izzard joke. But I digress. The other segments are the much less often used titles like unauthorized and explicit readings, which is my personal favorite, right? Like, if you really want to see where my passion is, if you're new to the show and you're like, what the fuck is this guy about? Besides bitching about Trump and vaguely referencing spirituality, pause after this episode and take a dip into any and all of the segments or episodes with the unauthorized and explicit readings title. You know that you're looking at one of them. If you can see the cover art, that one is has bookshelves and it's all very brown. Other segments include totally irrelevant movie or media reviews, which I think I've done a grand total of 3 episodes of. But that's another one I'm kind of excited about, because I don't hate the media, especially not the entertainment media, despite whatever conspiracy theory brainwashing is trying to tell us all to hate them blindly. And I have media content that I admire or that I want to criticize. But so that's one segment. Unauthorized explicit readings is my absolute top favorite. When you get a chance, go binge those segments. The rest of the show will make a lot more sense. What other segments do I have? It's irrelevant. You get the picture. There's various segments. And there's a whole long history of the show I can get into for those who are really interested in behind the scenes things. So I put a pin in that because I have talked about it before somewhere. And likely we'll come back to it now in the future. Good Morning Trumptopia has been the one I've sort of focused on the most and or done the most episodes of, because, for obvious reasons, it's where my voice of social critique has been most fired up. And now that Trump is gone, and hopefully soon to be held accountable for the criminal things, it makes less and less sense to keep doing episodes with the segment banner of GMT, even though it's a great acronym and title, Good Morning Trumptopia. And I didn't steal that from anybody. The day I said Trumptopia was really early on, somewhere between the golden escalator moment and way before the first GOP preliminary debates. What are those called? Anyways, somewhere in there I was like, Trumptopia. And here we are, 4 years later. So much to talk about. So many things to hit on. From Rudy Giuliani getting slapped with a libel lawsuit, which is adorable as fuck. And people pontificating a bit late to the party, in my opinion, because I was talking about this back in the earliest of early days. But people pontificating, journalists pontificating and people endorsing this idea that the next tyrannical madman that will attempt some sort of political faux coup d'etat will be savvier, smarter, and more well-spoken. I said that from day one. Trump, to me, when he declared, I thought he was crazy, and I thought he was mostly angling for like the media exposure and to ride out the preliminary, procedural parade of PR. Ooh, that was a lot of alliteration. I like that. The procedural parade of PR events in order to garner more fans and then take them off to something, right? Like take them over here to some website or buy more of my new stupid book or something like that. And I really, really doubted that he genuinely meant to win and do something in office, do political things, right? I don't know if that was accurate or not. Some people still cling to that, and it can, from certain angles, it makes sense. But he definitely steamrolled the rest of the party and won the election. Won the nomination by a surprising, overwhelming sort of brute force thing, and it was in that early day, those early days when I was trying to formulate my theory about him, that I definitely hit something that I think has borne out. Like I spoke something back then and talked about it either in the podcast and or on social media, and I think that it's becoming evident that I wasn't wrong about this. Trump, whether he did it unconsciously or consciously, whether he was handpicked and selected and placed into power, or he sort of just, the odds were in his favor, he functioned he functioned in such a way, his overall impact was such that the political pendulum, the momentum of the country was pushed as far to the right as possible. And this was some new extreme. And now it's initiating its momentous swing back towards the left. We're still way right of center in terms of the arc of the pendulum swing. That doesn't mean that Joe Biden is right of center. Don't get it mixed up here. I'm saying that the point of it was to push the whole country. And plenty of people are speaking to this point now. I don't have any of the memes that I've seen recently in front of me, but I might find them in time to read them to you in just a few minutes. But there's people talking about how the left isn't really left. It's really sort of just right of center in a real political arrangement. And things like that, and how it's going to move further to the right. The last 30 years have been a wibbly-wobbly pendulum swing, drifting and being pushed as far extremely to the right as possible to displace the pendulum anchor as much as possible to the right. So that when this pendulum sort of balances out and kind of reaches its sort of longest period of arcing, it's going to circle way over to the right, way more over to the right than it had been in previous generations. And I think that's bearing itself out. I'm not saying I'm, some sort of political genius or that I predicted anything. That's just the impression that I had. I had a lot of previous impressions of the kind of person Trump was long before he ran for office. And I was really well aware of the fact that he was basically a Democrat for most of his adult life. So when he announced that he was going to take over the Republican Party, well, let's just say I wasn't surprised one bit when he just hammered down with the gaslighting on his own base. But I digress, friends. It's been a long, strange trip. It's been an exhausting and, dare I say it, mildly traumatic 4 years. And I think one of the problems we face now is that the base, the Trump base, is fractured. The GOP base is fractured and tearing itself apart. And more significantly, the GOP, like, office infrastructure, the people in office, the actual political agents, they're dividing themselves up between, we're going to continue to defend Trump, or we're going to just refuse to bother to defend Trump anymore, and or we're going to actually hold Trump accountable. Each of them calculating that their relationship to Trump is meaningfully impactful on their future political careers. And it's kind of ridiculous. Like, the pillow guy is desperately, according to reports, sort of hoping and wanting and longing and waiting for an endorsement from Trump. I doubt Trump will ever really think to give it to him unless he's surrounded by political administrative consultants that guide him towards it. I think Trump might be burnt out, having done better than expected and pushed the country all the way to the left, all the way to the right, further than it's ever been pushed to the right. But who knows, right? I don't pretend to know things that I don't know. But so much is going on, friends. It can be overwhelming. Meanwhile, over on the left, what do I call the left? Been calling them the blue tyranny. And there's a little bit of facetiousness there, because if that's tyranny, I don't want to know what 8 years of Trump would have turned into. Even from the coalition of those who voted from him, and this is to be expected, it's no surprise, because that coalition was very loosely united in their opposition to Trump, but also sort of bending over backwards to ignore the fact that they hadn't made very much of they haven't really seemed to have made, I don't want to make too blunt accusational sounding statements, but this coalition does not seem to have put a lot of effort into resolving its differences. A lot of talk of unity, and a lot of people speaking about what they expect from Biden, but I don't see a lot of solid groundwork. And if it's happening and I'm missing it, forgive me. I obviously can't see everything, right? But help me find it, because I wanna tap into it and see what's going on. It's easy to bash people for talking about unity if you've been part of the group of people that have done absolutely nothing to contribute towards national unity for the last 4 years. So that's fun. That's going on. The right is hyper criticizing Trump generally speaking, the anti-Biden coalition over there on the right end of the spectrum of things is already, like, from moment one, from 1201 Inauguration Day, has just been beating Biden around the bush, to screw up a pun and an analogy and mush them all together there. But they've been trying to, really whip and rally and bash. But excuse me, one second. They've been trying to beat Biden down with this sort of hypervigilance that's so way out of proportion to their own giving a damn of what Trump was doing, which is absurd. And of course, one of the most annoying things about hyperpartisanship that's been obvious since Ronald Reagan was in office. When the other team does it, it's a sin, and it's everyone involved, and anyone who supported it is going straight to hell. If their own team does it, we're not going to talk about it. Let it slide by. And that's how political echo chambers work. Having said that, let's turn it over to our imaginary DJ friend, DJ Zed, with a hybrid trap remix track called Coils Sprung Deep Dawn. Alrighty, friends. How's about those Bernie memes, right? The Bernie memes. And then, like, the layer of memeology that developed over it, like, around it. Sorry, DJ Zed, I tuned you. I, like, dialed you out. I was getting ready to... I apologize. He's just glaring at me with this, like, stoic... I think future historians digging through the archive of the net are going to stumble across some of the more abstract of these Bernie mitten memes and like be really, really, really confused. But it was adorable, and I'm not surprised at all. Right? Everyone, one of my favorites is the fact that it got to that level that it became a meme about the meme, using the guy looking, you know, at the other girl while his girlfriend looks shocked template. I don't know what you call that one. And some of these memes have really weird titles for like their base template. But, there's the one where it's like Bernie, the guy looking, is all of America or all of the world, and the girl being outraged is, however you want to look at it, the Biden administration and the entire inauguration. It's wild, but it's gotten crazy. Like I can appreciate a meme going so viral that like everybody has to make their own version. But some of them are just way out there, and I don't get them. And there was even one I didn't like. I rarely do this, but I actually was like, nope, don't even like this one. This one's not allowed. I wish I could remember what it was, but I don't remember what it was about it. But he was just like chilling with the wrong people. There was something about it. It was like, no. But it was almost 2 days ago that I saw that one. I can't deal with how sliced up and hyper saturated our cycles are now. Like a day feels like a week feels like a month feels like a year, and 2020 feels like a decade unto itself. And if you're wondering, no, I'm sober. I totally get that a lot. People are like, you're too fucking stoned, man. I'm like, that's funny, but I'm not right this hot second, But I digress. That's neither here nor there. I am severely sleep deprived. So if you're wondering what's up with me today, that's it. I literally third night of not having slept anywhere near enough hours. Minutes, not even half. Like I didn't even take a nap this time. I'm just up. Probably gonna crash out soon. And I'll probably, like the last time this happened to me, sleep for like a day and a half, and it'll hurt. But I don't know how much longer it's gonna go. But I'm really worried that there's gonna be like a period of really, really what's the word? Jaded or hyper satirical Bernie memes, and some of them have already gotten there. Some have like flipped the whole meme inside out, and instead of putting Bernie somewhere else, have put their face on Bernie in the original image, which I guess is sort of full circle. I don't know who it was that did that, but I noticed, and I was like, is that the guy who just posted? Yep, that's the same person. I didn't track names. Somebody that I recently added, and I don't know who it is. But if it's you, well done. That was pretty good Photoshop. And B, can we stop now? I mean, not directed at that person, but that's enough Bernie memes. It would be incomplete of me to not point out that the awesomest part of all of that, besides the hilarious diversity of choices made in the memification, the awesomest part, and I wasn't sure if this really happened at first, because it was one of those things that was like, wow, but did it really happen? Because there's no sourcing. It was just another meme. But I then saw Bernie say it on television, so I know it's real because it was Bernie saying it. But he took, I don't know which ones of the memes, he took them and slapped them on a sweater or a hoodie or something. And whatever the initial lot that they got sold out in a matter of minutes. And he gave all the proceeds to local charities, or a local charity. I doubt Bernie's listening to my podcast, but if anybody who is a big Bernie supporter is and wants to throw this out there and get me credit, like they should track down every single Bernie meme imaginable and put them all on hoodies and sell them like forever until people just get sick and tired of it, right? That would be, and keep doing it as a charity thing. So kudos to the burn for that. So much going on, and so many things to discuss. But I'm delirious and my throat hurts, so I'm gonna probably keep this episode shorter than usual, which isn't saying much because I'll say that at like minute 29, and then suddenly I'll look up at the clock and it's, almost 60 minutes. Too many things and not enough consensus, not enough like setting aside of irreconcilable differences, not enough healing. It's barely been, this Wednesday will be the 3-week anniversary of the clusterfuck failure that we are giving way too much credit to, calling it a Capitol building insurrection. Although, not to minimize or dismiss the horrible things that did happen. I think my favorite, which is a terrible thing to say, but I think the part that really speaks volumes, as if it weren't all really loud enough, was that there were people literally using the thin blue line flag, which, for those who do not know, that's an American flag, mostly in black and white, but with one of the red bars in blue, which is meant to represent police unity, like support for police officers and, solidarity in standing together, along a thin blue line. The level of holy clusterfuckery, like what the fuck, of Trump supporters, and Trump is a quote-unquote law and order kind of guy, beating police officers with their thin blue line flags on sticks. So many things that can be unpacked from the events that happened on that day. Was it January 6th? And in the subsequent weeks. But ultimately, I think that the bottom line is, even the Q shaman, the guy with the horns and the face paint, has denounced Trump. Now, as I knew this was going to happen, and I saw the defense mechanisms kicking in early on. A lot of the keyboard warrior, Sunday morning quarterback types that are part of the Trump base and the Q subset of the base were arbitrarily, and also sort of through talking points, rationalizing away all of the credit, right? And like the single most serious criticism of the base and their reaction to what happened at the Capitol building is that they simultaneously are we're patting themselves on the back, celebrating it, rejoicing it, while refusing to take responsibility for it and blaming others for it and doing this echo chamber mindfuck of like, yay, look at this. We had t-shirts with the date on it and Civil War and Trump's name, but it was all somebody else's fault because they fooled us, and it wasn't Trump. He didn't trick us into doing this. It was slowly but surely. And I think anybody outside of the Q, Trump, GOP bases, because they're all separate but intermingled, all the rest of us, and I've said this before, and forgive me for being redundant, we should be focusing on manifesting their realization that they've been duped. Not by calling them names, not by stooping to their level and getting aggressive and confrontational, but by saving space and sharing thoughtfully at them, the facts and the reality that none of their predicted outcomes actually came to be. Although tragically I hear that there's already, lots of goalposts shifting and kicking of the can down the road, and some new event horizon has been established in early March. I don't know many details because I don't spend a lot of time on Donald.win or whatever the fuck the new Trump cult website is. Because the reason I don't go there is that already contend enough with Trump supporters on my own preferred social media platforms, the ones I'm already comfortable and excited about using. And if I went to like their turf, I would just be surrounded by them and have very little backup. And I would be very, very tempted to get into it with them. And I don't need to, right? I don't need to go bring the argument to them. That hard, at least. But slowly but surely, if we all save space for them, say prayers for them, and share gently but firmly in their general direction more accurate information than they've been allowing themselves to consume in the Q echo chamber, and continually point out to them that, you know, they're constantly accusing everybody else of being brainwashed sheeple, and lo and behold, they behave very much like brainwashed sheeple in that they just keep blind faithfully believing that something's going to happen when nothing is going on. They find it apparently interesting and a little bit triggering when you compare them to end of the world prophecies from organized religion. That sort of thing. But collectively, they are going through the process of coping with their cognitive dissonance and coming to terms with the plain and simple fact that although there were some true things wrapped up in all the nonsense, as you know, that's how PSYOP works, that's how psychologically manipulative content functions. It has to have some truthiness to it or else nobody buys into it, right? This goalpost shifting and this promising that something eternally will, it's unsustainable. And eventually they'll just be left wondering what happened and why don't we hear from Q anymore? Why don't we hear from Trump anymore? It's not going to happen in the next 3 weeks or anything, but that's my long-term prognosis. It's not a prediction. It's a logical conclusion that eventually Trump will stop giving a shit about politics because he's like that, right? He's a little too self-oriented for it anyways. And that whatever mechanisms are behind the Q content, that's going to, you know, the resources there are going to dry up and be retasked to other things. And slowly but surely, I think that demographic of people are going to deal with the fact that they've been manipulated. But I've said all that before. Sorry, I hate myself. I feel like this episode is really sucking, guys. And I apologize. It's the insomnia. And the fact that I feel a little overwhelmed. There's still so much noise about Trump and how wrong everyone else is about him. There's just this cacophony of outrage and apologistic, you know, defense of and expressing and bemoaning and as what's the phrase in the Bible? Gnashing of teeth. That it's fascinating and sad and distracting. And it makes it really difficult to have meaningful conversations with that entire demographic. And it, of course, is going to have a lasting impact in our politics. If we, the rest of us, right, everybody, and I don't care what political end of the spectrum you come from, everybody else who's outside of the base of Trump Republicanistic Q-ism, whatever you want to call it, if we don't facilitate a deep understanding on their part, then we're going to suffer a pretty intense backlash eventually. And, you know, midterm elections are just around the corner, folks. brace yourselves for that tedium, because I bet as the trend has been over the last 30 years, the whole cycle's going to start a little bit earlier than usual, because we're going to start talking about it and pointing towards it. Well, I mean, people already are, right? And we're not even... I mean, Biden was literally inaugurated 4 or 5 days ago. We're barely about to get to a full week of Bluetopia, and we are most certainly not done transitioning. In terms of how the blue base, or the base of the coalition against Trump, is treating Biden, it's all over the place. There are people that just have blind faith in him and have checked out and are no longer paying attention because he's in, and they think that's it, and they're done. There's people that are really aggressively, critically trying to keep sustained pressure on him to be as leftist as possible, whatever that means. And, there's people in between and all sorts of variants. And there's people who are just dissatisfied, right? He's not perfect enough. That coalition of people against Trump runs the risk of not staying or not remaining a sustainable base for the administration, in terms of where, political willpower, quote unquote, bunny ears with my fingers, political willpower is the currency, right, of getting things done, as we do, the way things are done nowadays. And if the anti-Trump coalition doesn't kajigger itself, to borrow a phrase, into being a strong pro-Biden-Harris base, in a thoughtful, meaningful, hold them accountable kind of way, not in a blind faith, they can do no wrong, we're going to adulate and worship them kind of way, because that's exactly what the Trump base did. And the biggest part of our critique of them is that, like, they became a cult as opposed to the source of political power. That's the thing, right? Politics is corrupt. And if all we do as participants in the system is blame those in power without holding them accountable, then it will continually be corrupt. It'll always be corrupt. Politics will keep finding inventive ways to perpetuate corruption. And if we fixate on all the wrong possible ways of holding them accountable, then we also sort of, perpetuate the corruption, i.e., redonkulous stormings of Capitol buildings and violence and death threats and attempted kidnappings are not legitimate ways to express yourselves about your political leaders. It's beyond the bounds of decency and, civility, etc., etc. And not protected by any of the critical rules or laws that everyone sort of pretends or thinks that, would protect them. Free speech doesn't protect hate and or threats of violence, right? So why are you speaking hate speech and making threats of violence? And more importantly, never mind that they're not protected, they don't achieve anything, right? What has been achieved? What has any group, Proud Boys, Boogaloos, have any of them achieved? Not much that I can measure. Failed kidnapping attempts, a failed political coup d'etat, a failed attempt to manipulate the process, legitimate or otherwise. I just see sort of a big pile of things that they thought they were going to do and that didn't really pan out. Not by no means, as you'll see, I'm sure, and you digging into past episodes and continuing to tag along into future episodes. By no means am I going to blind faith ass kiss anybody in Bluetopia. The blue tyranny will get my criticism. And so far, there's not as much to criticize as there was in the opening days of Trumptopia. But there's a few things, like how the $2,000 survival check has been whittled down to, and there's various numbers being reported, but it's been whittled down to something slightly less, for sure, and has yet to be delivered. And that the idea, there's flaws everywhere. And we must remember that holding politicians accountable and spewing hate and irrational anger is not the same. So, in the long run, I think that the right is going to have its coming to terms post-Trump. And then once that gets all processed in the collective minds and emotional bodies of the community, then we'll be able to take note that the left is also going to have its own reckoning about Biden. Because I'm a weirdo, right? I'm sort of in the middle. Like the Buddha points out, between every pair of extremes, there is a middle path. And between Trump is a divine savior and Biden is the best president ever, there is a middle path. And I humbly invite you to join me on it as we continue to navigate these trying and ridiculous times. But for right now, I'm 7 minutes behind on playing a bit more music. So here is something called Seismic Endurance Trainings, a D and B Storm Group Pad digital audio track for your ear hole entertainment. Two wings, one bird. That was the first thing that I was like, wow, that's kind of painfully obvious. I'm surprised people don't see it. That I noticed about politics. And this is back when Ronald Reagan was in office. I was new in town. I was new in the country. I was new on this planet. But I was a vivid observer of the world around me. And it seemed pretty clear, right? Here's a more nuanced take on that. And tell me what, feel free to respond if you think it's crazy. It's funny though, like, the only people that ever respond to my stuff online is always like, you're crazy, you're fucking wrong. And then when I try to have a conversation with them, they just block me. So hopefully I get some more interesting responses to this, but hear me out. If, this is an if-then statement, right? If the right wing is all about manipulating their base with the tools of grievance, real, imaginary, perceived, made up, or otherwise, then the left wing is all about manipulating their base with the tools of aspiration. Think about it. The right wing is about grievance, right? Like, in terms of its sociological, psychological motivators that they use to prod and poke their base into action. Grievance this, grievance that, blah, 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 blah. And if you don't believe me, I mean, take a really hard clinical look at Trump's speeches. It's all woe is me, grievance, grievance this, grievance that, grievance this. And it's all their fault over there. There's never any accountability on our part. I alone can fix it, but I will not take responsibility for any of it. That's, to paraphrase Trump's own words. Now the left, he's always been about, the shining city on the hill, and we can get there, and we can do it, and it'll get better and better, and things are rough, but, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with aspiration, right? And honestly, if addressed maturely and fairly, there's really nothing wrong with expressing one's grievances. But in both cases, this is, the two wings are an echo chamber. They are echo chambers unto themselves, and then they reverberate and echo chamber each other. One of the things that annoys me the most about American politics is that the left accuses the right of doing a lot of the things that the left does, and the right accuses the left of doing a lot of the same things that the right does, and nobody seems to care. I mean, I'm not alone in this. I've got plenty of, I know plenty of people, social media acquaintances or otherwise, that are savvy to the game and are trying to get people on both sides to be like, oh yeah, by calling out both sides of it. It's tricky though, because aspiration is hard to shit talk. Grievance is easy to be like, look at you. And, it's easy to belittle grievance politics or to dismiss it and to critique it. And you don't really need to vilify it, because grievance politics gets pretty gross and pretty vile in and of itself, because it's pretty ego-driven. It's anchored in ego. Me. My group is righteous, and it's also victimhood, right? Like, we are righteous and true and totally victimized by all the evildoers. Whereas aspirational politics is so much harder to vilify that, it's easier to sort of admit that's what makes it easy to sort of just keep going with the flow, even though that the left is it has to be inherently complicit with the right. Otherwise, the right could not get away with all the shit that it gets away with. The right doesn't get away with the bullshit it gets away with because it's powerful. It gets away with it because the left plays along with them. This also explains why the right, if you were nonpartisan, if you were from another planet, and you showed up in 2020 and looked at the public outrage and critique from one party against the other, it's hands down undeniable that the right goes to weirder and crazier and more implausible extremes in vilifying the left. Because it's really hard to bitch and moan about feeding people. It's really hard. It's they do it anyways. And therein lies their own nonsensical hypocrisy, right? Which gives them zero credibility to stand on as far as I'm concerned. But the right, they're bombarded with a vilification of the left that's so much more extreme because it's a challenge to say making things better for everybody is bad. It's a hard sell. And of course, they have to themselves pretend to really, really be interested in wanting to make things better for everybody, while simultaneously, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, not everybody, because only the special ones are special, right? That's inherent. That's totally inherent in the right's grievance ideological tool set. We are the special ones. Everybody else sucks, and we're victims of that. So if you're living in that mentality and you're looking at the actual literal declared statements of the left, you have to add conspiracy theory and drinking blood and satanic blah, 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 blah to really whip up the base into a deep, egregious, and outraged frenzy. But look, from the left, you don't have to try as hard because you're already pretending to ride higher than the other party, because your own party is. You don't have to go around assuring yourself that you are the most righteous because you speak about righteous things. The left is always, well, in our lifetimes, right? Not always historically, and also I hate the term always because absolutist statements are rarely accurate and usually misleading and almost never absolutely correct, as I opened the show with. But in the last 4 decades, the left has been the base of union, inclusion, right? In terms of how they package themselves, how they sell themselves to themselves, how they try to lure people under their big tent. And the right's the opposite of all that. Because they got to stand in opposition to whatever the fuck the left stands for. Which is ridiculous. Because you just get to further and further extremified extremes. Either way, this is all like a pendulum swing tug of war. That's a very lousy mixed metaphor. We're in this stress test of how far can we push the right to the right, and how will the left respond? And here we are in the very beginning moments of that like suspenseful moment where the pendulum has enough inertia to sort of want to keep going to the right, but it's not, so it's hanging in the air. And I don't think we're really going to start seeing the adverse reactionary response, for a little bit, but it's going to build. And of course, as I was trying to explain to an online acquaintance of mine, that's why they put Trump into office. I think it's adorable that the Trump base is riddled with conspiracy theorists who believe that the evil cabal pre-selects all presidents, but somehow this orange spray-tanned car salesman of a guy wiggled past their super tight security, and control in that situation. And of course, they can only believe that because they completely ignore, the facts of Trump's public life, which are, right there for them all to see, but they just categorically ignore it. And mind you, the left does kind of the same, right? How many people think Joe Biden is an adorable guy who's super caring and blah, 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 and all this effusive positivity about Biden. But I mean, if you really look at his political track record, it's not so hot. What he's got going for him is the personal tragedy in his life, the fact that he's now wicked hated by everyone on the right, which is a rallying point for everyone that's leftist thinking, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, the opposite of Trump. The left-right paradigm is always sort of has, for a long time now, to avoid making absolutist statements, the left-right paradigm has for a long time now been deeply dissatisfactory to me, because I don't even really think that it accurately describes the ideology in any way, shape, or form. But just like the actual directions, they're inseparable from one another. And as I've talked about before, and I'll talk about it again in future episodes, after I catch up on some sleep and am not so insomniatic, there's actual, tangible evidence that they ultimately collaborate and are in collusion with one another, despite all the babbling noise about fighting. But also, a lot of the fighting is, real enough. And we are in interesting times. Do I think anything's going to happen March 3rd with the Q prophecies? Well, let's put it to them this way. Hillary Clinton never got locked up, and an exponentially growing number of Trump allies, supporters, and sycophants have been. Do I think that that's righteous and true and great? Not necessarily. But, is Trump ever actually going to arrest and incarcerate all of his political adversaries? No, I don't think so. But as they love to say, we shall see. Oh, I want to leave one last thought with you, friends. For as scatterbrained as I am, I thankfully have some notes here that are helping me out. The right is obsessed with prophecy, one way or the other, right? Because that end of that political party has deep, weird attachments to Christian ideology, whereas the left is much less about incorporating religious dogma into the politics. The right is definitely about trying to do that, right? They're the ones they're the ones complaining that they are being forced to, quote, tolerate others while they're simultaneously pushing their interpretation of God down people's throats. It's fascinating. And there's a really cool meme that's way too long to try and paraphrase now about how no one's trying to force you to accept anything. You're just being asked not to kill people over your preferred ideological setup. But I digress. That's not the question I was kind of coming at. I'm going to leave you with this question, friends. Because the right is so interestingly fixated with prophecy, especially right now, what if prophecies and predictions are not actually really about accurately identifying and preparing for future events? That's what we're told they are, right? I predict the end of the world. So what do? So who cares? Well, you got to get ready and prepare for it, right? I predict this or that. What if prophecies and predictions, predictions in general, prophecies. What if prophecies and their content are about attempting to harness the human power of individual and collective belief in an attempt to focus that belief power to try and manifest that which is described in a given prophecy. Huh? What if? And that the prophecies that fail to come true in a real, meaningful, tangible, measurable, verifiable way that the whole world can see and agree, yep, that prophecy sure as fuck came true, is because that particular prophecy didn't reach whatever critical mass of invested belief power. A question to explore deeply in some future episode. My brain is a little gooey right now from the insomnia, but thank you as always, dear friends, for tuning in and listening to my show. I am and forever your humble and eccentric host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart, because remember, friends, hating the politicians achieves nothing. And hating politicians is one of the things that the system explicitly is trying to cajole you into doing. Hate breeds hate, and their child is violence. So, don't hate Trump. Don't hate Biden. Don't hate any political puppet. Call them out, hold them accountable, and attempt to heal them. Because, in my humble opinion, that is the calling of our generation, of our lifetime, of this era that we live in. To transcend political ideology and heal the human species. And for more on that, tune in to the segments entitled Almost Daily Zencast and today's Nugget of Zen. And as I was harping about earlier, my all-time favorite episodes, unauthorized and explicit readings. Namaste, and thank you, friends.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.
P.S. That stay woke bit was supposed to be sarcasm. I've never claimed to be woke, and I'm sure I've already gone off on tangents and long rambles about wokeness, and I'm sure I'll come back full circle to talk about them again. But I wanted to leave one last little drop right here at the end of this episode. I believe the following to be true, and I don't like saying that sentence. I don't like believe. I am convinced. I've come to the conclusion that the following is true. I don't remember if I'm quoting someone or if this is an original thought or what, but it's a note from way back in Martin Luther King Day. But I wrote this down on Martin Luther King Day. I don't think it's a Martin Luther King quote. Anyways, if you are perpetually living in fear of your freedoms being taken away, you are already a slave.